black woman protected a Hell's Angel biker from bullies, the next day, 300 bikers showed up at her diner. She didn't know his name when she stepped between him and the fists, but the next morning, 300 motorcycles turned her cracked parking lot into sacred ground. Hi there! Thank you for stopping by to listen to this wonderful story today. While you relax and ready to enjoy the story, please hit that subscribe button, thumbs up, and make sure you share this story to your loved ones. Now let's get started. The dawn came slow over Gravel Bend, like it was tired of showing up to the same forgotten place. Autumn Collier stood behind the counter of the Bramble and Brew Diner, a coffee pot in one hand and a rag in the other, wiping down Formica that had lost its shine somewhere around 2003. The fluorescent lights above her buzzed with a sound that felt like judgment. She didn't mind. She'd learned to live with noise that didn't say anything kind. Outside, Route 48 stretched empty in both directions. No cars, no travelers, just the occasional 18-wheeler that didn't bother to stop. The diner had been her husband's dream once. Maurice had seen potential in this patch of cracked asphalt and sun-bleached siding. He'd smiled when he hung the sign, "The Bramble and Brew, where the road feels like home." That was 11 years ago. Maurice had been dead for 8. Autumn set the pot down and pressed her palms flat against the counter. Her reflection stared back at her from the stainless steel napkin dispenser. 46 years old, edges softened by exhaustion, eyes still sharp but tired of cutting. She wore her hair natural now, pulled back in a low bun. No time for anything fancy. No one to impress. The bell above the door hadn't rung in 2 days. She glanced at the clock. 5:47 a.m. Jessa would be up soon, getting ready for school. Her daughter, 17, brilliant, too aware of how hard her mother worked to keep them above water. Autumn didn't want her to know how close they were to losing this place. The bank had sent another letter last week. She'd stuffed it in a drawer beneath the register and hadn't opened it. She moved to the window and looked out at Gravel Bend, a town that had once been something. Now it was a gas station, a church with a leaning steeple, a post office that closed at noon, and a bar that opened too early. The people here were polite to her face. They smiled when she said good morning, but she'd never been invited to a backyard barbecue, never been asked to join the book club at the library. She existed here. She did not belong. Maurice used to say it didn't matter. "We'll make our own family, Autumn. This diner'll be the heart of it. But you can't build a family when you're the only one showing up." She turned away from the window, poured herself a cup of coffee, and sat on the stool by the register. The silence pressed in. She was about to pull out her phone when she heard it. A low, rumbling growl. A motorcycle. Autumn looked up. Through the window, she saw him. A man on a Harley, older, maybe late 50s, with a thick gray beard and a leather vest patched with symbols she didn't recognize. His bike was dusty, like he'd been riding for days. He pulled into the lot slowly, killed the engine, and sat there for a moment, hands still on the handlebars. He looked lost. Autumn stood, smoothed her apron, and unlocked the door. The man glanced up as she stepped outside. His eyes were pale blue, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "We're open," she said. He nodded once, didn't smile, just swung his leg over the bike and walked toward her. His boots were scuffed to hell. His vest read Hell's Angels across the back in bold letters, and beneath it, South Carolina chapter. She'd heard of them. Everyone had. But she'd never seen one up close. He stopped a few feet from the door. "You got coffee?" "Fresh pot," Autumn said. "That'll do." She held the door open. He walked in, and she caught the scent of engine oil and old leather. He didn't look at her as he passed, just moved to the corner booth and sat with his back to the wall. Habit, she thought. The kind you pick up when you've spent too long watching your own back. Autumn poured him a cup and brought it over. Set it down gently. He wrapped both hands around it like it was the first warm thing he'd touched in weeks. "You want food?" she asked. "Not hungry." "You look hungry." His eyes flicked up to hers. For a second, something like surprise crossed his face. Then he looked away. "Maybe some toast. I'll make you eggs too. I didn't ask for." "I know." She walked back to the kitchen before he could argue. She cracked 2 eggs onto the griddle, dropped bread into the toaster, and worked in the easy rhythm she'd perfected over a decade. Cooking was the one thing that still made sense. You put in effort, you got something back. Simple. When she brought the plate over, he stared at it like he didn't know what to do. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You're welcome." She refilled his coffee and left him alone. He ate slowly, deliberately, like a man who'd forgotten what it felt like to be cared for. Autumn wiped down tables and pretended not to watch him. But she did. She always noticed people who looked like they were carrying too much. When he finished, he stood and walked to the register, pulled a 20 from his wallet, and set it on the counter. "Keep it," he said. "It's $12. "I know." He turned to leave. Autumn didn't stop him. But as his hand touched the door, she spoke. "You got a name?" He paused, didn't turn around. "Rust." "Autumn." He nodded once. Then he walked out into the pale morning light, climbed onto his bike, and rode toward the edge of town. Autumn watched him go. She didn't know why, but something about him stuck with her. Maybe it was the way he'd said thank you. Like he meant it. Like he wasn't used to meaning it. She pocketed the 20, poured herself another cup of coffee, and waited for the day to start. She had no idea it already had. Have you ever helped a stranger without expecting anything in return? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your story. Rust didn't plan on staying in Gravel Bend. He'd been riding for 3 weeks straight, chasing nothing, running from less. South Carolina wasn't home. Nowhere was anymore. But the chapter here had always been good to him. Reaper ran things tight, kept the brothers in line, didn't ask questions when you needed to disappear for a while. But Rust wasn't ready to see Reaper yet. Wasn't ready to explain why he'd left Arizona in the middle of the night, or why his phone had been off for a month. So he'd pulled off Route 48, found the diner, and told himself he'd leave after coffee. That was 2 hours ago. Now he sat on his bike outside a sun-faded convenience store, staring at a pack of cigarettes he'd bought but hadn't opened. He'd quit smoking 6 years ago, the same year his daughter stopped answering his calls. He turned the pack over in his hands. The cellophane crinkled. He thought about the woman in the diner. Autumn, the way she'd looked at him. Not with fear or pity, but with something else. Recognition, maybe. Like she knew what it felt like to be tired. He slipped the cigarettes into his pocket and started the engine. He told himself he was just riding through town, just seeing what was here. But when he passed the Bramble and Brew again and saw her through the window, wiping down tables in the empty diner, he slowed down. He didn't stop. He kept riding, past the post office, past the church, past the bar with the crooked sign that read Hendrick's Tavern. And that's when he saw them. 3 men standing in the gravel lot beside the bar. One of them was tall, broad-shouldered, with a buzz cut and a shirt that stretched too tight over his gut. The other 2 were younger, meaner-looking. They were laughing about something, passing a bottle between them even though it wasn't even noon. Rust wouldn't have cared. He'd seen 1,000 men like that in 1,000 towns. But then the tall one looked up and saw him. Their eyes met. The man grinned. Not friendly. Predatory. Rust looked away and kept riding. He made it another 50 feet before he heard the truck engine roar to life behind him. He glanced in his mirror and saw the black Chevy pulling out of the lot, trailing him. His jaw tightened. He turned down a side street, trying to lose them, but Gravel Bend was too small. They followed, honked, One of them leaned out the window and shouted something Rust didn't catch. He kept his speed steady, didn't react. But they got closer. Rust pulled into the parking lot of a closed-down auto shop and killed the engine. He sat there, hands on the handlebars, breathing slow. The truck skidded to a stop behind him. Doors opened. Boots hit gravel. He heard them before he saw them. "Hey, old man." Rust turned his head. The tall one, Troy, he'd learn later, stood a few feet away, arms crossed. The other two flanked him, grinning like dogs. "Nice bike," Troy said. "You lost." Rust didn't answer. "I asked you a question." "Just passing through," Rust said quietly. "Yeah." Troy stepped closer. "Funny, 'cause it looks like you're hanging around. And we don't really like strangers hanging around." Rust met his eyes. "I'm not looking for trouble." "Good. Then get the hell out of our town." Rust turned back to his bike. He was about to start the engine when Troy grabbed his shoulder and yanked him back. Rust stumbled, caught himself. His chest tightened. His hands curled into fists. "What's the matter?" Troy said, shoving him again. "You too old to fight back?" One of the younger guys laughed. "Look at him. Probably pissed himself." Rust's vision narrowed. His pulse pounded in his ears. He'd been in enough fights to know how this would end. He could take one of them, maybe two, but three? Not anymore. Not at 57 with a bad knee and a back that hadn't been right in a decade. He stepped back, hands raised. "I don't want trouble." Too late. Troy shoved him hard. Rust hit the ground, palms scraping gravel. Pain shot through his wrists. He tasted dust. And then he heard her voice. "That's enough." The three men froze. Rust looked up. Autumn stood at the edge of the lot, hands on her hips, eyes blazing. She wasn't tall, maybe 5'6", but she carried herself like she was made of iron. Troy turned, eyebrows raised. "The hell are you doing here, Autumn? I could ask you the same thing." Her voice was calm. "Cold. You boys got nothing better to do than jump an old man 3-on-1? "This ain't your business," Troy said. "It is now." She walked forward, stopped between Rust and Troy. "You touch him again, I'm calling Sheriff Mallory. And I'll make sure he knows you've been day drinking again." Troy's jaw tightened. "You threatening me? I'm telling you to get in your truck and go home." One of the younger guys snickered. "You really gonna let her talk to you like that?" Troy stared at Autumn. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. Finally, he spat into the dirt. "Whatever. He ain't worth it anyway." He turned and walked back to the truck. The other two followed. The engine roared. Gravel sprayed as they peeled out. Silence. Autumn turned and offered her hand to Rust. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he took it. She pulled him to his feet. He winced, but didn't let go right away. "You all right?" she asked. "Yeah." His voice was rough. "You didn't have to do that." "I know. They might come back." "Let them." Rust looked at her. Really looked. Her face was set, her shoulders square. She wasn't afraid. And that terrified him more than the fight. "Why?" he asked. She met his eyes. "Because nobody deserves to be small." Something inside him cracked. He didn't cry, but his throat tightened, and he had to look away. "Thank you," he whispered. She nodded once. Then she turned and walked back toward the diner. Rust stood there in the parking lot, dust settling around him, and felt something he hadn't felt in 20 years. He felt seen. Autumn didn't look back as she walked away. Her hands were shaking, but she kept them pressed flat against her sides where no one could see. Her heart hammered in her chest like it was trying to break through her ribs. She'd learned a long time ago how to keep her face calm when everything inside her was screaming. She made it back to the diner, pushed through the door, and leaned against the counter. The cool formica against her palms grounded her. She exhaled slowly. "What the hell did you just do?" She didn't have an answer. Troy Hendrick was mean when he was sober and dangerous when he wasn't. He'd grown up here, played football at the high school, married young, divorced ugly. He ran a contracting business that barely stayed afloat, and spent most evenings at his daddy's bar drinking away whatever pride he had left. People tolerated him, because his family had been here for generations. Autumn had tolerated him, because she had no choice. But today, something in her had snapped. Maybe it was the way Rust had raised his hands. The resignation in his eyes. Like he'd already accepted that the world was cruel, and there was nothing he could do about it. She knew that feeling. The bell above the door chimed. Autumn's head snapped up. Rust stood in the doorway, helmet under his arm. He looked uncertain, fragile, even. "You shouldn't have done that," he said quietly. "You already said that. I mean it. Those guys, I know who they are," Autumn interrupted. She straightened, crossed her arms. "And I know what they're capable of. But I also know they're cowards. They only fight when they outnumber you." Rust stepped inside, let the door close behind him. "That doesn't mean they won't come back. Then they come back." He shook his head. "You don't understand. People like me, we're used to this. But you got a business, a life here. I'm not worth risking that." Autumn stared at him. "You think I haven't already risked everything just by existing in this town?" Rust blinked. She took a breath, softened her voice. "I appreciate the concern, but I'm not some fragile thing that needs protecting. I made a choice. I can live with it." He studied her face, searching for something. "Why'd you do it?" "I already told you." "Tell me again." She held his gaze. "Because nobody deserves to be small." Rust swallowed hard. He looked down at his boots. "I don't even know you." "No, you don't. But you stepped in anyway." "Yeah. Why?" Autumn tilted her head. "You really want to know?" He nodded. She walked around the counter, leaned against it, arms still crossed. "Because I've spent 8 years in this town being tolerated. People smile at me. They say good morning. They eat my food and leave tips. But I've never been invited to a single potluck. Never been asked to join the church choir. When Maurice died, exactly 3 people showed up to his funeral. 3. And 2 of them were from out of town." Her voice didn't waver, but her eyes burned. "So when I saw those men treating you like you were nothing, like you didn't deserve basic decency, I couldn't just stand there. Because I know what that feels like." Rust's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Finally he said, "I'm sorry." "For what?" "That you had to go through that." Autumn shrugged. "It is what it is." "No," Rust said firmly. "It's not. You deserved better." Something in her chest loosened. She hadn't expected that. Hadn't expected him. Before she could respond, the door burst open. Jessa stood there, backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes wide. "Mama, are you okay?" Autumn straightened immediately. "I'm fine, baby. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be at school." "Marla called me. She said you got into it with Troy Hendrick." Jessa's eyes darted to Rust, then back to her mother. "Is that true?" "Marla needs to mind her business," Autumn muttered. "Mama, I'm fine, Jessa. It wasn't a big deal." Jessa looked unconvinced. She glanced at Rust again, sizing him up. "Who are you?" Rust shifted uncomfortably. "Just somebody passing through." "He's a customer," Autumn said quickly. "And he was being harassed. I stepped in. That's all." Jessa's jaw set in a way that reminded Autumn of herself. "That's all? Troy's gonna tell everyone in town you disrespected him." "Let him." "Mama, you can't afford to lose customers." "I'm not going to lose customers over doing the right thing." "You don't know that." Autumn's voice hardened. "Jessa, go to school." Jessa stared at her mother for a long moment. Then she turned to Rust. "You better be worth it." She walked out, letting the door slam behind her. Autumn exhaled, pressed her fingers to her temples. "She's right," Rust said quietly. "This is going to blow back on you. Probably. You should have just let them." "Don't." Autumn's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Don't tell me what I should have done. I made my choice. You don't get to take that away from me by feeling guilty." Rust stared at her. Then, slowly, he nodded. Okay. He turned toward the door, paused. "For what it's worth, thank you." Autumn didn't respond. She just watched as he walked out, climbed onto his bike, and rode off down Route 48. She stood there alone in the diner, the silence pressing in again. And for the first time in years, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she'd done something that mattered. Autumn woke the next morning to the sound of thunder. At least, that's what she thought it was. She sat up in bed, disoriented, her alarm clock reading 6:02 a.m. The rumble was deep, continuous, growing louder. It rattled the windows, shook the walls. She threw off the covers and stumbled to the window, pulled back the curtain. Her breath caught. Motorcycles. Dozens of them. No, hundreds of them. Streaming down Route 48 like a river of chrome and leather. All heading in the same direction. Toward her diner. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Mama?" Jessa appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. "What is that?" Autumn didn't answer. She was already moving, pulling on jeans, yanking a sweater over her head. Her hands trembled as she tied her sneakers. Jessa followed her down the stairs, both of them rushing to the front door. Autumn stepped outside onto the porch of the small house she rented 2 blocks from the diner. The sound was deafening now. She could see them clearly, bikes of every make and model, riders in leather vests, bandanas, sunglasses. They rolled past her house in formation, disciplined, deliberate, and every single vest bore the same patch. Hell's Angels. "Mama!" Jess's voice was barely audible over the engines. "What did you do?" Autumn's throat tightened. "I don't know." She ran. She sprinted the 2 blocks to the Bramble and Brew, her heart slamming against her ribs. By the time she rounded the corner, she saw it. Her parking lot was full. Motorcycles lined up in perfect rows. Men and women standing beside them, arms crossed, faces unreadable. There had to be 200, maybe 300. The lot couldn't hold them all, so they spilled out onto the shoulder of Route 48, onto the grass, into the empty lot next door. The town had stopped. Cars idled on the street, drivers staring. People stood on sidewalks with their phones out, filming. Autumn saw Marla Tinsdale clutching her purse like the apocalypse had arrived. And in the center of it all, standing at the front of the diner with his arms folded, was a man she didn't recognize. He was tall, broad, maybe 60 years old, with a gray beard braided down his chest and a leather vest that looked like it had survived a war. His eyes locked onto hers as she approached. She stopped 10 feet away, breathing hard. "Can I help you?" Her voice came out steadier than she expected. The man tilted his head, studied her for a moment. Then he stepped forward and removed his sunglasses. "You Autumn Collier?" "I am. Name's Vincent Kane. People call me Reaper." His voice was gravelly low. "I'm president of the South Carolina Charter. Hell's Angels." Autumn's mouth went dry. "Okay." Reaper glanced back at the sea of bikers behind him, then returned his gaze to her. "We heard what you did yesterday." Her stomach dropped. "I didn't do anything." "That's not what Rust says." She blinked. "Rust?" Reaper nodded toward the crowd. Autumn followed his gaze. And there, standing beside his bike near the back, was Rust. He looked uncomfortable, almost embarrassed. But when their eyes met, he gave her a small nod. Reaper continued. "Rust Calloway's one of ours. Been riding with us for 30 years. He's a brother. And yesterday, 3 men jumped him in broad daylight. His jaw tightened. And you, a woman who didn't know him a damn thing. You stepped in. You stood between him and them. You protected him. Autumn didn't know what to say. Reaper took another step closer. His voice softened, but it carried weight. We don't forget things like that. She swallowed. I couldn't stand by. No, you couldn't. And that says something about who you are. He looked back at the bikers, then at her. So we talked it over last night. All of us. And we decided. We're gonna buy breakfast. All of us. Autumn stared at him. What? Breakfast? Reaper repeated. Eggs, bacon, coffee, toast. Whatever you got. We'll pay full price. We'll be respectful. We'll clean up after ourselves. He gestured to the diner. That work for you? Her mind spun. She looked at the crowd. Hundreds of faces, all watching her. Waiting. I don't. She shook her head. I don't have enough food for all of you. Then we'll take turns. We'll wait. We got time. I don't have enough staff. We'll help. I can't. Ms. Collier. Reaper's voice was firm but kind. You did something for one of us. Now, let us do something for you. Autumn's throat tightened. She looked past him, toward Rust. He was still watching her, his expression unreadable. She turned back to Reaper. You promise me there won't be any trouble. You have my word. No fights. No intimidation. Nothing. Nothing. She exhaled slowly, looked at Jessa, who had caught up and was standing a few feet away, eyes wide as saucers. Mama, Jessa whispered. What are you gonna do? Autumn looked at her daughter, then at Reaper, then at the hundreds of people who had ridden across the state, because someone had shown one of them basic human decency. She squared her shoulders. All right, she said, but I'm gonna need some help in the kitchen. Reaper grinned. You got it. He turned to the crowd and raised his voice. She said yes. First wave. 20 at a time. Be respectful. Be patient. And tip well. A cheer went up. Not loud or rowdy. Controlled, appreciative. The bikers began organizing themselves into lines. Autumn walked toward the diner in a daze. Jessa grabbed her arm. Mama, do you realize what just happened? Autumn looked back at the parking lot, at the leather and chrome and ink, at the people who had shown up for a stranger. Yeah, she whispered. I think I do. She unlocked the diner, stepped inside, and tied on her apron. And for the first time in 8 years, the Bramble and Brew was full. If 300 people showed up to support you after one act of kindness, how would you feel? Let me know in the comments. By 10 a.m., Autumn had served more meals than she'd served in the last 2 months combined. The diner hummed with life. Bikers filled every booth, every stool at the counter. They ate quietly, spoke in low voices, and true to Reaper's word, they were respectful. Some called her ma'am. Others nodded their thanks. A few told her the eggs were the best they'd had in years. Jessa had called in sick to school and worked the register. 2 of the younger bikers, a woman named Camila with sleeve tattoos and a quiet man named Davis, had stepped behind the counter to help wash dishes and bus tables. They didn't ask. They just did it. Autumn moved through the chaos in a kind of trance, flipping eggs, pouring coffee, refilling syrup dispensers. Her feet ached. Her back throbbed. But she didn't stop. Around 11, the door chimed and Rust walked in. He didn't sit, just stood near the counter, watching her work. She felt his eyes on her, but didn't acknowledge him. Not yet. She was too busy trying not to cry in front of 300 strangers. Finally, during a brief lull, she wiped her hands on her apron and walked over to him. You hungry? She asked. No. Then why are you standing in my diner? He hesitated. I wanted to make sure you were okay. She almost laughed. Do I look okay? Honestly? No. She did laugh then, short, sharp, edged with exhaustion. Well, at least you're honest. Rust glanced around the packed room. This wasn't supposed to happen. What do you mean? I told Reaper what you did. I wanted him to know. I didn't think he'd. He gestured vaguely at the crowd. Do this. Autumn leaned against the counter, studied his face. Why'd you tell him? Rust was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, because nobody's ever done that for me before. Something in his voice made her stop. She looked at him. Really looked. Saw the way his shoulders sagged. The weariness in his eyes that had nothing to do with age. Come on, she said quietly. What? Come with me. She led him through the kitchen, past Camila scrubbing a skillet, past Davis stacking plates, and out the back door into the alley. The noise of the diner faded. The air was cooler here, shadowed by the building. Autumn leaned against the brick wall and closed her eyes for a moment. Rust stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets. You want to tell me why you're really here? She asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, I've been writing for 32 years. Joined the Angels when I was 25. Best decision I ever made. And the worst. She opened her eyes, looked at him. He stared at the cracked pavement. I had a wife once. A daughter. Her name was Lily. She had these little braids her mama would do every morning, with beads at the ends that clicked when she ran. His voice softened. God, she loved to run. Autumn stayed silent. I was a different man back then, Rust continued. Angry, restless, didn't know how to be still, didn't know how to be a father. So I left, told myself I'd come back when I figured things out. He swallowed hard. That was 30 years ago. Autumn's chest tightened. I tried calling a few times over the years. Sent letters, money. But my ex, she remarried. Some accountant from Tennessee. Good man, from what I heard. Stable, present, everything I wasn't. He finally looked up at her. Lily stopped answering when she turned 16. Can't blame her. I was a stranger who sent checks twice a year and pretended that made me a father. Rust, I don't deserve kindness, he said, voice breaking slightly. I don't deserve people showing up for me. I sure as hell don't deserve this. He gestured toward the diner. But you gave it to me anyway. And I don't know what to do with that. Autumn stepped closer. You think I don't carry things too? He looked at her, surprised. She crossed her arms, not defensively, but like she was holding herself together. Maurice and I opened this place with everything we had. Took out loans we couldn't afford. Worked 18-hour days. People in this town told us we'd fail. Said a black couple had no business trying to run a diner on Route 48. Her jaw tightened. We proved them wrong. For 3 years, we packed this place. We were thriving. She paused, her voice quieter now. Then Maurice had a heart attack in the kitchen. Died before the ambulance got here. I found him by the stove. Rust's face crumpled. I've spent 8 years keeping this place alive because it's all I have left of him, Autumn said. But some days, I don't know why I'm still fighting. This town doesn't want me here. The bank's about to foreclose. And my daughter's watching me kill myself for a dream that's already dead. Her voice cracked. She looked away, blinking hard. But yesterday, she continued, when I saw those men pushing you around, treating you like you were nothing, I couldn't let it happen, because I know what it's like to be invisible, and I'm tired of pretending it doesn't hurt. Rust stepped forward. Slowly, carefully, he reached out and took her hand. She looked down at their joined hands, his scarred and calloused, hers worn and strong. You're not invisible, he said quietly. Not to me. Autumn's breath hitched. She squeezed his hand just once, and then let go. We should get back inside, she said. He nodded. They walked back into the diner together, side by side. And when Jessa saw them, saw the look on her mother's face, she smiled for the first time all day. Because for the first time in a long time, Autumn didn't look alone. The bikers kept coming. For 3 days straight, they came in waves. Some rode in from Georgia, others from North Carolina and Tennessee. Word had spread through the chapters. There was a woman in Gravel Bend who'd stood up for one of their own, and the Angels were showing their respect the only way they knew how, with loyalty, presence, and cash. By the third day, Autumn had made more money than she had in the previous 6 months combined. But it wasn't just about the money. On the second morning, she arrived to find that someone had repaired the broken hinge on the front door. By noon, 2 bikers were on the roof patching a leak she'd been ignoring for a year. A woman named Sloan, covered in ink and piercings, had replaced 3 burnt-out bulbs in the dining room without being asked. "You don't have to do this," Autumn told Reaper when she saw him tightening the bolts on a wobbly booth. He looked up, wrench in hand. "I know. Then why are you?" "Because you didn't have to do what you did either." He went back to work. "And because this place matters to you. So it matters to us." Autumn didn't know what to say to that. She just nodded and went back to the kitchen. Rust had become a fixture. He didn't leave town like he'd planned. Instead, he parked his bike out back and showed up every morning at dawn. He didn't ask permission, just walked in, tied on an apron, and started helping. He learned how she liked the coffee brewed, how she organized the walk-in cooler, how she hummed old Aretha Franklin songs when she thought no one was listening. And slowly, carefully, they began to talk. Not about anything heavy at first, just small things. He told her about the road, the towns he'd seen, the diners that reminded him of hers, the sunrises that made him pull over just to watch. She told him about Jessa, about how smart she was, how she wanted to study engineering at Clemson, but they couldn't afford it yet. "She's got your stubbornness," Rust observed one afternoon as they prepped vegetables together. Autumn smirked. "She's got her father's brain. But your heart." She glanced at him. He wasn't looking at her, just focused on dicing onions with surprising precision. "You know how to cook?" she asked. "Lived on the road for 30 years. You learn, or you starve. Why'd you stay on the road so long?" His hand stilled, easier than staying still. "And now," he set the knife down, finally looked at her. "Now I'm not so sure running was ever the answer." Their eyes held. Jessa cleared her throat from the doorway. "Mama, we need more coffee out front." Autumn blinked, the moment breaking. "Right. I'll get it." She brushed past Rust, her arm grazing his. Neither of them acknowledged it, but both of them felt it. That evening, after the last biker had left and the diner was finally quiet, Autumn sat at the counter with a cup of tea and her accounting ledger. For the first time in 2 years, the numbers didn't make her want to cry. Russ sat across from her, drinking black coffee. "You should go home," Autumn said without looking up. "Get some sleep." "So should you." "I will. Just need to finish this." He watched her work. The way her brow furrowed when she concentrated, the way she chewed the inside of her cheek. After a moment, he said, "Can I ask you something?" "Depends on the question." "Why do you still do this?" She looked up. "Do what?" "This." He gestured around the diner. "You're exhausted. The town doesn't appreciate you. You're drowning in debt. Why not sell? Start over somewhere else." Autumn set her pen down. "You really want to know?" "I do." She leaned back, cradled her tea in both hands. "Because Maurice believed in this place. He believed we could build something good here. Something that mattered." Her voice softened. "And because if I let it go, it's like saying he was wrong. That we were wrong. That everything we went through was for nothing. It wasn't for nothing. You don't know that." "Yes, I do." Rust leaned forward. "Autumn, look at what happened this week. You stood up for a stranger, and 300 people showed up to stand with you. You think that's an accident? You think that doesn't mean something? Her throat tightened. I think it means I got lucky. No, it means you're the kind of person people want to show up for. His voice was intense now, almost fierce. You've been carrying this place alone for 8 years. You've been proving yourself to people who'll never see you. But we see you. I see you. Autumn's eyes burned. She looked away, blinking hard. Don't what? Don't make me hope. The words came out broken, raw. She pressed her fingers to her eyes, trying to hold herself together. Rust stood, walked around the counter. He stopped beside her, close but not touching. Autumn, he said quietly. She shook her head. I can't do this right now. You don't have to do anything. Just let me say this. He waited until she finally looked at him. You've spent so long being strong for everyone else. Your daughter, this town, this diner, Morris's memory. But you don't have to be strong all the time. Not with me. A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, almost angrily. I don't know how to be anything else, she whispered. Then let me teach you. He reached out slowly, carefully, and took her hand. This time, she didn't pull away. She just held on, her fingers trembling in his. They stood there in the quiet diner, two broken people who'd found each other in the wreckage. And for the first time in 8 years, Autumn let herself lean on someone. Thank you, she whispered. Rust squeezed her hand gently. For what? For staying. He smiled, soft, real. Nowhere else I'd rather be. Outside, the moon rose over Route 48. Inside the Bramble and Brew, two souls who'd been lost for too long finally began to find their way home. The fourth morning started like the others. Autumn arrived at dawn to find Rust already there, coffee brewing, the kitchen warming up. He'd started keeping a spare key. She'd stopped questioning it. Morning, he said, handing her a cup. Morning. She took it, their fingers brushing. It had become a ritual. The bikers had finally thinned out. Most had returned to their chapters, their lives, their roads. But a core group remained. Reaper, Camila Davis, and a handful of others who'd grown attached to the diner, or maybe to what it represented. Business from the town had picked up too. Curiosity at first. People wanting to see what all the fuss was about. But some stayed. The food was good. The coffee was strong. And Autumn Collier, they were beginning to realize, had been here all along. Marla Tinsdale even came in, ordered pie, and left a decent tip. It felt like things were finally turning around. Autumn should have known better. It happened on a Thursday night. She'd closed up late, after 11. Jessa had gone to a friend's house to study. Rust had offered to stay, but Autumn had insisted she was fine. He'd left reluctantly, promising to come back early in the morning. She locked the front door, turned off the lights, and walked to her car parked in the side lot. That's when she saw it. The diner's front window, the big picture window that faced Route 48, was shattered. Glass glittered on the pavement like snow. Her breath caught. She ran to the front, her keys jangling in her shaking hand. Spray paint covered the door in jagged red letters. N*********, our lover. Go home. Her stomach turned. She unlocked the door with trembling fingers and stepped inside. The damage continued. Tables overturned, salt and pepper shakers smashed on the floor, ketchup and mustard smeared across the counter. Her register was untouched, but that wasn't the point. This wasn't about robbery. This was about hate. Autumn stood in the center of her destroyed diner, glass crunching under her feet, and felt something inside her collapse. She'd fought so hard, for so long, and for what? Her phone buzzed. She pulled it out with numb fingers. A text from an unknown number. You should have minded your business. Her hands started shaking, so hard she dropped the phone. It clattered on the floor. She sank onto one of the few stools still upright, staring at the ruin around her. 8 years. 8 years of sweat and tears, and proving herself and surviving. And in one night, they tried to take it all away. She didn't cry. She was too tired to cry. Rust found her there an hour later. He'd been riding past, couldn't sleep, just circling the town like he used to circle his guilt. When he saw the broken window, his blood had gone cold. He'd kicked down the door when she didn't answer his knocking. "Autumn!" She looked up slowly. Her face was blank. Empty. Jesus Christ. He took in the damage, his jaw clenching so hard it hurt. "Who did this? Does it matter?" "Yes, it matters." His voice was sharp with fury. "Tell me who." "I don't know," she snapped. Then quieter. "I don't know." But they both knew. Troy. His crew. Maybe others who'd been waiting for an excuse. Rust pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Reaper. We'll find them. We'll make them." "No." He stopped. "What?" "I said no." Autumn stood, her voice hollow. "No retaliation. No revenge. No war. Autumn, they can't get away with this. And what happens if you go after them?" She turned to face him fully. "They come back worse. They hurt Jessa. They burn this place to the ground. Is that what you want?" "I want them to pay." "Why?" Her voice cracked. "So you can feel like a hero? So you can fix something? This isn't your fight, Rust." The words hit him like a punch. "That's not fair," he said quietly. "None of this is fair." Autumn's composure finally shattered. "I stood up for you because it was the right thing to do, and this is what I get. My diner destroyed. My daughter in danger. My life turned upside down. All because I couldn't mind my own business." "You don't mean that." "Don't tell me what I mean." Tears streamed down her face now. "You've been here, what, a week? And you think you understand? You think you know what it's like to spend 8 years fighting just to exist? To smile at people who hate you? To bury your husband and keep cooking his recipes because it's the only thing you have left?" Russ stepped toward her. "Autumn, no!" She backed away. "You need to leave." He froze. "What?" "You heard me. Leave. Go back to the road. Go back to running. That's what you're good at, right?" The words were cruel. She knew it, but she couldn't stop them. "I stayed because you asked me to," Russ said, his voice breaking. "I never asked you for anything. You didn't have to ask. I stayed because—" He stopped himself. "Because what?" He looked at her, eyes raw with emotion. "Because for the first time in 30 years, I felt like I mattered to someone." Autumn's breath hitched, but she forced herself to harden. "I can't carry you, Rust. I can barely carry myself. I'm not asking you to carry me." "Yes, you are." Her voice rose. "You want me to tell you you're forgiven, that you're a good man, that staying here will fix whatever you broke 30 years ago. But I can't give you that. I don't have anything left to give." The silence that followed was suffocating. Rust stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Okay. If that's what you want, I'll go." He turned toward the door. "Rust." But he didn't stop. He walked out into the night, climbed onto his bike, and rode away. The sound of his engine faded into nothing. Autumn stood alone in her destroyed diner, surrounded by broken glass and broken dreams, and finally let herself collapse. She sank to the floor and sobbed. Rust rode until the sun came up. He didn't know where he was going. Didn't care. He just opened the throttle and let the road take him, the way he'd done 1,000 times before. Running was easy. Running made sense. Staying was the hard part. By the time he reached the South Carolina state line, his hands were numb from gripping the handlebars, and his chest ached in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. He pulled off onto a scenic overlook. One of those forgotten roadside stops with a rusted historical marker and a view of hills that rolled into forever. He killed the engine and just sat there, staring at nothing. "I can't carry you, Rust." Her words echoed in his head. She was right. He knew she was right. He'd been running his whole life, leaving wreckage behind him. His wife, his daughter, every person who'd ever tried to get close. And when Autumn had stood up for him, when she'd seen him as something more than a washed-up biker with nothing to offer, he'd latched onto her like a drowning man grabbing driftwood. But she was drowning too, and instead of helping, he'd just weighed her down. Rust pulled out his phone. 3 missed calls from Reaper. 2 texts from Camila asking if he was okay. Nothing from Autumn. He stared at her name in his contacts for a long time. Then he opened his photo gallery, something he rarely did, scrolled back years until he found it. A picture of Lily. She was maybe 7 in the photo, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a drawing she'd made of a motorcycle. His ex had sent it to him years ago, back when she still tried to include him. He'd never responded, just looked at the picture once, felt the knife of guilt twist deeper, and kept writing. He studied his daughter's face now. She'd be 37, probably married, maybe had kids of her own. He wouldn't know. He'd made sure of that. "You've been running your whole life," he thought. "And what do you have to show for it? Nothing. Nobody. Just miles and regret." But Autumn had stayed. She'd buried her husband and kept his dream alive. She'd raised a daughter alone in a town that barely tolerated her. She'd fought every single day for something bigger than herself. And when she'd seen him being beaten down, she hadn't run. She'd stepped in, because nobody deserves to be small. Rust closed his eyes. He thought about what Reaper had told him once years ago, after Rust had shown up to the clubhouse drunk and broken. "Brother, you can't outrun yourself. Sooner or later, you gotta stop and face what you left behind." Rust opened his eyes. He looked at the road stretching east, away from Gravel Bend, away from Autumn, away from the first place he'd felt like he mattered in decades. Then he looked at the road heading back. And he made a choice. Autumn hadn't slept. She'd spent the entire night cleaning, sweeping glass, scrubbing paint, writing tables. Her hands were cut and blistered, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. If she stopped, she'd have to think. And if she thought, she'd have to feel. By dawn, the diner looked almost normal. The broken window was covered with plywood. The spray paint was gone, though the ghost of the words still lingered if you looked close enough. Jessa had come home around 6 a.m., taken one look at her mother and known. "Mama, I'm fine. You're bleeding." Autumn looked down at her hands. She was. "It's nothing. Mama, please." "I said I'm fine, Jessa." Her voice cracked. She softened immediately. I'm sorry, baby. I need to keep moving." Jessa wrapped her arms around her mother. Autumn stiffened, then melted into the embrace. She let herself be held. Let herself be her daughter's child for just a moment. "Where's Rust?" Jessa asked quietly. Autumn pulled away, wiped her eyes. "Gone." "Gone where?" "I don't know." "Away." "Did you tell him to leave?" Autumn didn't answer. She didn't have to. Jessa shook her head. "Mama, why would you do that?" "Because it's better this way." "Better for who?" "For everyone. For him. For us." Autumn turned away, started wiping down the counter again. "He doesn't belong here. He stayed for a week. He helped you." "He?" Jessa's voice rose. "Mama, I saw the way he looked at you. It doesn't matter." "Yes, it does." "No, it doesn't." Autumn's voice broke. "Because people leave, Jessa. They leave and they die and they take pieces of you with them. And I can't." She pressed her fist to her chest. "I can't do that again. I can't." Jessa stared at her mother, tears in her eyes. So you're just gonna push everyone away? Live here alone until this place finally breaks you. If that's what it takes. That's not living, Mama. That's just surviving. Autumn opened her mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. Jessa grabbed her bag. I'm going to school. But when I get back, we're talking. Really talking. She left, the door chiming softly behind her. Autumn stood alone in the quiet diner, surrounded by the remnants of the night's destruction, and felt the weight of her choices settle over her like a burial shroud. She'd sent him away. She'd chosen to be alone. And maybe that's what she deserved. Rust pulled into the parking lot of the Bramble and Brew just after 8 a.m. His heart pounded as he saw the plywood over the window, the fresh scrub marks on the door. Rage and grief warred in his chest. But he didn't let them win. He parked his bike, took a deep breath, and walked to the door. Through the glass, he saw her, standing behind the counter, staring at nothing, looking more lost than he'd ever seen her. He raised his hand and knocked. She turned. Their eyes met. And in that moment, everything hung in the balance. Autumn stared at him through the glass. For a moment, neither of them moved. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then slowly, she walked to the door. Her hand hesitated on the lock. She could send him away again, protect herself, keep the walls up, but she was so tired of walls. She unlocked the door and opened it. Rust stood on the threshold, helmet under his arm, eyes red-rimmed like he hadn't slept either. He looked at her cuts, her exhaustion, the plywood behind her, and his jaw tightened. I shouldn't have left, he said. I told you to go. I know. And I did. I rode all the way to the state line. He paused. But I turned around. Why? He met her eyes. Because you taught me something. She waited. You taught me that running doesn't fix anything. That the only way through the pain is through it. Not around it. Not away from it. His voice grew stronger. I've spent 30 years running from who I was, what I did, the people I hurt. And I told myself I was protecting them. That they were better off without me. He took a step closer. But the truth is, I was protecting myself. From the guilt. From the shame. From having to look at what I'd become. He swallowed hard. And then you, a woman who owed me nothing. You stood up for me. You saw something in me worth defending. And it cracked me open. Autumn's throat tightened. I don't know if I can fix what I broke 30 years ago, Russ continued. I don't know if my daughter will ever forgive me. But I know this. I don't want to run anymore. I want to stay. I want to fight. I want to stand beside someone who's been standing alone for too long. His voice dropped to a whisper. If you'll let me. Autumn's eyes filled with tears. Rust, I can't promise you anything. I don't know if I know how to let someone in. I've been alone so long. Then let me teach you. He echoed her words back to her from days before. Let me stay. Not because you need saving, but because we're both tired of carrying everything alone. She looked at him, really looked, saw the scars and the regret and the hope, saw a man who'd finally stopped running, and she made her choice. Okay, she whispered. Okay, stay. Rust exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for 30 years. He stepped inside, set his helmet down, and without a word, pulled her into his arms. Autumn stiffened for just a moment, then collapsed into him. She buried her face in his shoulder and finally, let herself break. Great, shaking sobs tore through her. All the grief she'd been holding, for Maurice, for the diner, for the loneliness, for the years of fighting, poured out. And Rust held her. He didn't try to fix it. Didn't tell her it would be okay. Just held her and let her feel it all. When her tears finally slowed, she pulled back, wiping her face. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. I said terrible things to you. You were hurt. And scared. And I understood that. He cupped her face gently. But I'm not leaving again. Not unless you tell me you really don't want me here. I want you here, she admitted. I'm just afraid. Of what? Of hoping. Of losing again. Rust rested his forehead against hers. Then we'll be afraid together. The sound of motorcycles interrupted them. Autumn pulled back, alarmed. What? Rust smiled slightly. I called Reaper on my way back. Told him what happened. Rust, I said no retaliation. This isn't retaliation. The door opened, and Reaper walked in, followed by Camila, Davis, and at least 50 other bikers. They filed into the diner quietly, respectfully. Reaper looked at the plywood window, then at Autumn. We heard. I don't want trouble, Autumn said immediately. Neither do we. Reaper crossed his arms. We just want to help rebuild. New window, fresh paint, whatever you need. I can't afford. It's already paid for. Camila stepped forward. We took up a collection. Every chapter in the Southeast contributed. Autumn's eyes widened. You didn't have to. Yes, we did, Reaper interrupted. You're family now, and we take care of family. Autumn looked around at the faces, rough, weathered, but sincere. People who'd shown up for her. Not because she was perfect, not because she had it all together, but because she'd shown up for one of them when no one else would. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Say you'll let us help, Davis said quietly. She looked at Rust. He nodded. Okay, she said. Okay. A cheer went up, controlled, respectful, but genuine. Within an hour, the diner was a hive of activity. Someone measured for a new window. Others patched and painted. Camila organized a cleaning crew. Reaper made calls to suppliers. And in the middle of it all, Autumn cooked. She made eggs and bacon and hash browns and toast. And she fed the people who'd come to stand with her. Rust worked beside her, anticipating her needs, moving in the easy rhythm they'd developed. Jessa came home from school around 3 and stopped dead in the doorway, staring at the transformation. Mama? Autumn walked over, pulled her daughter into a hug. We're gonna be okay, baby. Jessa looked past her at Rust, who gave a small, uncertain wave. He came back, Jessa said. Yeah, he did. Jessa smiled, bright and real. Good. By sunset, the diner looked better than it had in years. A new window gleamed. Fresh paint covered the walls. The sign out front had been replaced with one Reaper had commissioned. The Bramble and Brew, where everyone belongs. The bikers gathered outside for a final toast. Reaper raised a bottle of water. To Autumn Collier, the bravest woman in South Carolina. To Autumn, they echoed. She stood on the steps, Jessa on one side, Rust on the other, and felt something she hadn't felt in 8 years. She felt like she belonged. That night, after everyone had left, Autumn and Rust sat on the diner steps, watching the stars emerge over Route 48. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For coming back. For staying. He took her hand. Thank you for letting me. She leaned her head on his shoulder. What happens now? I don't know, he admitted. But I think I'm gonna call my daughter. See if she'll talk to me. Autumn squeezed his hand. I think that's a good idea. What about you? She looked at the diner. Her dream, her burden, her home. I think I'm gonna keep fighting. But this time, I won't do it alone. Rust smiled. No, you won't. They sat in comfortable silence as the moon rose and the highway stretched endlessly in both directions. Two broken people who'd found each other in the ruins. Two souls who'd learned that love doesn't always look like you expect it to. Sometimes it looks like a biker with regrets and a woman with walls. Sometimes it shows up on 300 motorcycles. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to let it, it stays. What's one act of kindness that changed your life? Share your story in the comments. You never know who needs to hear it.